Hello and welcome to She the People. The spotlight this Women's Day is on the COVID impact one has seen on the lives of girls and women across the world, but particularly in India. This kind of a pandemic has not just reversed many efforts when it comes to humanitarian health or education, but significantly dented initiatives that have worked really hard for decades to impact gender equality in a positive way. What exactly is going to be the road ahead, and how are various stakeholders looking at this issue? Recently, Save the Children came out with a report which reflected on the following statistics and many more. To give you a highlight of that, a study that explores the immediate impact of COVID 19 on the survival, development, and protection and participation of girls in urban slums. Across four states, one in three girls attended online classes during the lockdown. That gives you an idea of the kind of impact all of this has had on education of women in particular. Now, to put the spotlight on the many issues and how things will unravel from here as we go forward, we've got a very, very important set of voices that are joining us on this discussion. To introduce my guest today, Dia Mirza, who's the artist ambassador for Save the Children, Sanjana Sanghi, the youth advocate for education for Save the Children India. Also from Save the Children India is their girl champion, Lusi Sharma. We have Adil Hussain, who's an award winning actor, an actor who traverses the world of art house, mainstream, and international cinema with equal ease. Many of his films have tried to break the gender bias. Dia, if I can come to you, I've seen, that throughout COVID, you and many others were participating in sort of reminding us all that there is a need for people in influential positions to truly remind the world that we were at the cusp of something that was very difficult, particularly for girls and their education. How are you trying to get this momentum back on track as their artist ambassador?
Thanks for having me, Shaili, and thanks for having this conversation. I think it's a very critical conversation. And I don't think Women's Day would be complete without highlighting how far behind girls have dropped off the education ladder. And I think a lot of gains that we had achieved in the last decade have been lost because of, as is evident, I guess many of us had the privilege of working from home and studying from home, but there was a very, very vast majority of young girls across the country and the world who didn't have this privilege because they weren't connected to the internet. They didn't have smartphones or any kind of technology that could help them or enable them to continue school or education online. I think what COVID-19 has done is that it's revealed the fractures of society, but what it's also done is it's deepened these fractures. And the Wings 2022 report is a critical report, Shaili, because it's one that I think will empower government, policymakers, and NGOs and agencies across the world, and especially in India, to determine how we need to build back better. And we keep using and hearing this term, right? Build back better. I think one of the most urgent areas that we need to build back better on is to reduce that divide that has been created by technology in learning, and also ensure that all the girls who got left behind on the learning curve are brought back into the learning curve. I stand to gain from the fact that I've been associated with STC for over 5 years now. I've been a part of many of the reports that they've released in the past, and I've witnessed how it impacts policies and how it impacts policymakers. And we've seen some very strong actions being taken in the areas. For example, the last report was based on safety and security for girls and women. And we actually saw state governments implementing things like more street lights, street cameras, all kinds of things in response to that document. And we really hope with all our hearts that, when we present this document to governments, especially those that the report has been focused on, Maharashtra, Bihar, I'm not sure what the other two states are, but even because the study is centered in these states, I hope that these state governments really sit up and take note and make a difference. And I will obviously do my best to ensure everybody is listening and we're all talking about it and understanding what's happening with our girls.
लूसी एज अ सेव द चिल्ड्रन चैम्पियन, आप बताएं कि किस तरह आपका एक्सपीरियंस रहा ड्यूरिंग दिस एंटायर पीरियड ऑफ कोविड, द इम्पैक्ट इट हैड ऑन योर एजुकेशन, लर्निंग कर्व, एक्सेस टू हाइजीन एंड हेल्थ केयर सर्विसेज. आपका क्या एक्सपीरियंस रहा है, एंड आपकी असेसमेंट में हम काफ़ी एफर्ट्स में पीछे गिर गए हैं?
जब कोविड का सिचुएशन था तो बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था, जिस तरह कि हमारा स्कूल बंद हो गए थे, अपना ट्यूशन बंद हो गया था और बाहर खेलने नहीं जा पा रहे थे, जिसके कारण बहुत तकलीफ हो रही थी. फिर जब जाकर ऑनलाइन क्लासेस स्टार्ट हुए तो बहुत कोई बच्चे लोग ऑनलाइन क्लास ठीक से नहीं कर पा रहे थे, क्योंकि हर किसी के पास स्मार्टफोन नहीं था जो ऑनलाइन क्लास कर पाए. अगर था भी तो घर में एक मिसे हमारे घर में ही हमारे पापा के पास फोन था और हम लोग पास फोन नहीं था. हम लोग 5 भाई बहन हैं, तो हम लोग ठीक से ऑनलाइन नहीं कर पाते थे. ये प्रॉब्लम होता था लॉकडाउन के समय में बच्चों लोग को लेकर.
Right.
और हमारे यहाँ पे जब लड़कियां लोग को जो प्रॉब्लम्स होती थी, जिसके कारण वो बगल में दवाई दुकान नहीं होने के कारण वो बाहर जाकर कुछ सामान खरीद नहीं पा रही थी. ये प्रॉब्लम बहुत सारा हो रही थी.
Sanjana Sanghi, where are you on this? Firstly, thanks for joining us from New York, and I know it's sort of different time zones there, but just wanting to understand, where do you see yourself as a youth program lead looking at these challenges that we are facing today on the ground? Because it will directly scuttle the learning curve of young people.
I'm realizing more and more, Shaili, as you know, but for anyone watching who may not know, because I spent my college life working with students, it was and spending real physical time with them every day after my lectures at the NGO that I used to work with while I was still at university. I used to do it in my own world. And I remember having this feeling like I want to scream out and be able to share their experiences and their challenges with so many more people. And I remember feeling so frustrated that I couldn't do that, because the feeling that I had of needing to galvanize support, that just one of us or even 10 of us are just not enough, used to be such a strong feeling that I had, which is why in my own little way in university, I tried to create societies and clubs and groups and run campaigns. And we did have impact in our Delhi University world. And now I feel, like you said, incredibly fortunate that I can reach out to a larger audience. But the way to do that is to evoke empathy. And I feel that empathy only comes when there is awareness. So the only one thing that I always kind of try and reach out to, at least the youth, to my age group, is to read up more and become more aware of the challenges in the world outside of us. Because then what Dia says or what Adil says or what I try to say will resonate, and we'll actually be able to come together. But we've, through Ally Up for Her, for example, it was 100 days of action that we all really had very specific milestones that we worked towards, whether it was reaching out to the education ministry or speaking with girls, and we made huge headway. So it's going to be campaigns, big and small, now luckily on the ground with the pandemic slightly easing off, that'll lead to change. It's going to be step by step, but true honest intent lies at the core of it.
Adil, I want to bring you into this conversation. It's been very important to me personally, and I'm very delighted to see that Save the Children also puts men at the center of these conversations. How can men play a role in solving for the challenges women and girls today face in a post-pandemic scenario?
I think we need a very organized plan, organized meetings, detailed, meticulously planned, organized interactions between all of you, and all those people, those who are shifting towards the feminine side of their being. We need to meet regularly, talk about regularly. It has to be, as I said, it's a voluntary action. It has to be spontaneous voices which we should seek for. But I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would be willing to listen to your views, to my views. I'm talking about people, those who are in positions of power, from the film world, from Tamil film industry, from Hindi film industry, from Assamese film industry, or any other film industry in India. And we could probably have initial that what are the issues that and how to go about it, because we need to come with a lot of intensity uh, toward talking about it, so that it reaches more and more people. And when common people, when I say common people, those who look up to these amazingly popular figures, when they speak about it, there would be certain change, and that is good enough at least to start with. But it needs a detailed planning, a long-term planning, how to start, where to start, who to call, and meet regularly to do workshops, meetings, not conferences and debates, informal meetings, very informal meetings. Suppose I am free for next 1 week, and you, all of us, are free, and maybe I will call somebody who, a male member of my fraternity, who would come, and maybe we 4 or 5 will have a long meeting. How to go about it?
Just to come back to you, Adil, what in your life has made you recognize that, gender inequality is a very real issue? I mean, a lot of people would say that, you don't just follow something like this, but you actually believe it. What was that crucial thing in your life that made you believe that you had to work towards a more gender equal world?
My foundation is very much from the mystic aspect of the world, where men and women are absolutely equal. Rather, as I said, that men do not have full organs that women have. We don't have ovaries, uterus, womb, and breast. And women are bestowed by nature to have, they have it.
Right.
And I had a conversation with my dad much later in 2003 about it, when I realized that he still feels that he is superior to my mom after reading all the books that he read. Then I told that, Dad, what you did for me, my mom could have done it easily, earned money and looked after us financially. But what my mom did for me, if you break your head on that wall, you have no way you could do it, because you are not capable. You are not designed to.
They are part of all of these problems that we are seeing come to the fore in a world that's, I guess, trying to get back onto the road to equality, is recognizing more and more the importance of agency among young girls. What role do you think that plays in every effort towards gender equality?
Shelly, I think one of the fundamental flaws of the way our societies are structured is that there is no importance given to agency of women, right? Which is why we see so many young girls not receiving or not having access to education, being married off much earlier than they should be, not being raised to
Yes.
be pro-choice. And I think that all of us are trying to do our bit, you included, to emphasize the need for agency, the importance of agency, and the fact that agency cannot be achieved without education and employment. These are two fundamental cogs of a woman achieving or establishing agency and finding her voice. So yeah, I mean, it's so unfortunate that we've fallen back decades, and I really hope that more of us who belong to the privileged group do much more to help and empower organizations that are working in this space, and also within just the immediate sphere of our influence, right? Whether it is the people that work with us at home or in our offices, educating and helping. Like, for example, over the years, I've helped my driver understand how important it is for him to educate his daughters, his granddaughters. And I'm very glad and very grateful that they're doing really well. They're excelling in school. could make, computers and smartphones accessible to them even during the pandemic. So I'm saying that change happens at an individual level, even in the immediate choices that we make in our everyday life, and the circle, that the sphere of influence that we have. It may not even be as far reaching as policy. It just has to happen fundamentally. It has to start at home. It has to start with the people that we have an immediate influence over.
So Dia, I have a follow up, and this has a lot to do with the participation of women. I know we talk a lot about like how to protect them, how to help them with education and other solves. I think one of the things that's very important is how can adolescent women participate in the conversation on their rights and having, sort of the right to their rights. What's your assessment based on your association with Save the Children?
Shaili, it's amazing that I've interacted with some of the most dynamic leaders, girl leaders, over the last few years working with Save the Children, who come from very, very challenging circumstances and backgrounds and are so brilliant in every way because they've received access to education. And just that has made such a big difference. And I think, I see so many young girls even online today talking about agency, talking about rights, talking about equality, and influencing not just their peers, but I think many more people about understanding the need for equality and working with organizations. But if you take, for example, Lucy, who's going to be joining us in this conversation, she's a role model. She's somebody who,
Yes.
through her leadership, through the choices that she's been able to make, just with a little bit of help, has been able to do so much with her life already, and will continue to impact change in wonderful ways. So I think every young girl needs to understand that just a little bit of help, just that little bit of access to education or the right organization that can provide an individual who perhaps doesn't have access with life skills, with access to education, can make such a huge difference. And we all have these people around us. There may be people living in an urban dwelling in a slum close to where we live. It may be somebody who works within your domestic space. It may be somebody who works in your school. It could be anybody. But I think we're all capable of finding such people and trying to help.
So, Sanjana, school closures, as the STC report study tells us, have been sort of the biggest reason for the setback. And even as we are trying to come back, it's not as if, those people who logged off from mainstream school will suddenly make a return. And that is the most worrying part today.
It's truly been a devastating experience to see what the past 2 years have meant for. I'll speak specifically about students and children, and within that, the girl child. Uh, Somehow, there is a pandemic that affects all, but the same pandemic has affected girls so much more adversely, whether it's them. Some startling statistics, right? Like 42% of the girls in the report that we've recently carried out, and it's going to be out for everyone to see, didn't hear back from school staff um, across the 4 states that we researched on. They simply didn't hear from their schools once the pandemic started, so they didn't even know what to do or
Yes.
how to go back. And it's worrying because it's pushed them into early domesticity. Girls, in any case, from familial pressure, had to fight to go to school, and now it's become a fight to just not be pushed into not even discovering their potential at 13 and 14 years of age. So we have many challenges in front of us, and it's only through collective action and empathy that we can even try and move forward. Right now, I am not feeling too optimistic, so I feel like the next 2 years are key in how much we can bring everything back together.
लूसी, आपकी तरह बहुत और यंग लड़कियां हैं जो होप कर रही हैं कि दे विल बी पार्ट ऑफ द डिजिटल लर्निंग साइकिल, उनको भी अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ मिलेंगी। आप किस तरह की चीज़ें इस वक्त किस इश्यूज़ के बारे में सोचती हैं? विच चैलेंजेस डू यू वांट टू ओवरकम एंड सी कि लड़कियों के लिए आफ्टर ऑल इन मुद्दों पर काफ़ी बदलाव आए?
अभी जिस तरह की सरकार की योजना जैसे चल रही है, जिस तरह की हम चाहते हैं कि लड़कियां लोग के लिए सरकार वो हर जगह पे, जैसे लड़कियां लोग स्कूल जाती है, ट्यूशन जाती है, तो रास्ते में बहुत सारे छेड़खानी होते रहते हैं, बहुत सारे घटनाएं होते हैं, क्योंकि लाइट्स नहीं रहते वहाँ पे गली में, रास्ते में। वहाँ हम चाहते हैं कि वहाँ पर सरकार हर जगह पे लाइट्स रहे। और जिस तरह देखा जाता है कि अभी टाइम लड़कियां लोग बाहर जाती है तो बहुत सारी घटनाएं होती है, उसके साथ केसेस बहुत सारे आते हैं, क्योंकि वो अपने आप को सेफ नहीं महसूस कर पाते, जिसके कारण वो बाहर ठीक से पढ़ने के लिए नहीं जा पाते हैं। ये हम चाहते हैं कि वो थोड़ा पर सरकार उस पर ध्यान दे। और हमारे यहाँ पर लड़कियां लोग को लेकर जैसे कि उनको जो निजी प्रॉब्लम होती है वो बहुत तकलीफ होती है, क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ पर जो मेडिसिन की दुकान जो है वो थोड़ा दूर दूर में है। हम चाहते हैं कि हमारे घर के पास में हो, जो लड़कियां लोग आसानी से जाकर वो चीज को ले सके और अपने इस्तेमाल में कर सकते हैं।
Adil, how important is it today for platforms, for cinema, for entertainment to really come out there and spell some of these very important aspects of participation in gender equality, participation in having more women and girls working in this sort of world of entertainment? You know, do we give cinema a bit of a free chit to not have enough impact driven stories out there?
They are not from Mars or Venus. They are from this society. Politicians, cinema, filmmakers. I'm not saying all of them, but quite a lot of them have evolved a lot. I mean, I've seen the change. Also, the way the male gaze is changing. There are young men who are making films, amazingly beautiful films, but very few. So they come from the same society where they have been educated to compete in this cutthroat
Yes.
competition. Imagine the imagery cutthroat, how brutal that image is. So they grew up in this society, and parents have taught what they knew the best. In the best of wisdom, they have taught whatever they have. My dad taught me a lot, but this aspect he was completely almost zero. In spite of being a devotee of Tagore and Sharat Chandra and all these amazing Assamese great writers of literature. But as I said, that they don't know any better. I don't think they know any better. Purposely, they do what they do.
Sanjana, what is your belief about young people perception and what, let's say, a film industry creates on screen? At the end of the day, we are a product of society, and cinema often says, "Hey, you know what? What we show is a subset of what society is." Then it becomes a chicken and egg situation. Who starts making this effort?
I personally don't think we're getting anything fundamentally wrong. I think that there is so much undoing that is required, that to arrive at a clean slate for us is taking all of this effort, because we have long had um, cinema in India has long been a product of the male gaze. And as women are getting more empowered, as they're becoming more aware of their voices, as female writers are coming in, and new OTT platforms are sanctioning these stories, it is now happening. So I feel we're right in the midst of a revolution, of
Yes.
the cinematic gender revolution. And while a revolution is occurring, you know how it is. You can never see it. But I do believe that when we look back in 2032, this will be a significant time. And I can feel it because I am a young actor in our country. I am feeling liberated with the kind of parts that I am getting to play. Even in a very commercial film like I've just completed called Om, it's an action thriller. I'm playing an action girl who has typically been an ally to the male action hero, but I was stunned how well etched my character was.
Character was.
And I wish I didn't have to be, but you know, you gotta take baby steps. So I truly believe we're onto a good path.
As an influential person, how are you looking at the role individuals can play in this road to solve for many things that Save the Children has been working towards: health, education, access to hygienic spaces, and so on?
Well, Shaili, I think it comes from the fact that I think everybody needs to understand that we all need to become participative citizens, that we all have a role to play in building a nation and building a more equal and fair and just and peaceful world. That all of our choices collectively matter. And it's not just because
Yeah.
we have the privilege of influence, but it's our duty. We are duty bound by the constitution of the country to do such things. So I think just understanding that at a fundamental level can make such a big difference. I also feel, Shelley, that more and more people are beginning to recognize that and understand that. And I know for a fact that I've been deeply inspired by watching and learning people like, say, Shabana Azmi, who very early in my career helped me understand that, you know, cinema and storytelling are very powerful instruments for positive social change. And it doesn't need to, we don't need to limit that to perhaps just the kind of stories we choose to tell, but we can also expand that to the kind of choices we make and how personal becomes political, and how every single thing that we understand about society has to start representing itself or reflecting in the choices we make every day.
So, Dia, one of the biggest issues around access is something that gets often not talked about: the digital access. And this was true about online education, but the digital divide remains pretty significant and might have been exacerbated due to the pandemic because of, let's say, lack of funds, loss of jobs, and various other ways. Controlling daughters, calling them, into safer spaces, because perhaps the perception in India is that a mobile phone corrupts a girl. So all of these are conflicting situations a girl goes through, but they must be solved for us to make it back on the road to any effort to educate women.
Right to education is a fundamental right, thankfully. So I guess this would come within the ambit of right to education, right? And I hope that this report helps policymakers include right to technology and being able
Right.
to study online as a part of the right to education, because RTE would be incomplete. Of course, nobody would have envisaged or foreseen this kind of a global situation. But now that it has presented itself, we have 2 years of experience. We've understood the kind of setbacks it's
Yeah.
created. We need to quickly devise a way and a system, and I think that's what the report will really help people do, is understand how we can create a system of education that remains accessible to all people everywhere, even if we are locked down.
So I want to come back to an important issue that we have been talking about, but I think it's even more relevant when all of these people in this panel discussion really spell it out as to how they want that support. So a very big part of this discussion is also how men can be allies to every cause and effort that is being done for women and their education and more equal rights. So maybe Adil, I'll start with you. The role men play today, the role they can play today.
I told one of my friends one day that you have to be a woman friend, that you have to be more compassionate towards men because they have no clue what's going on. They don't know, they're like the role I played in English Vinglish. When Gauri ji came to me to ask me to play that role, I said, well, don't consider men or my dad as a villain, as villain, because he doesn't know what's going on. So I'm going to play as an innocent, ignorant man, and that's what the situation is, because
Yeah.
nobody has taught us. No one has taught us. Nowadays, it's been talked about a little bit, but I would say 90% of the Indian men folk, they probably, data, I'm just saying, I have not done a research or anything, but it feels like 90% of men, or maybe more, even 95% of men, have no clue that how to look at women, that women are the way that we want them to look at. They don't know. So if you don't know, you are not guilty. Um, it's the responsibility of people, those who know about it deeply, those who have experienced it, those who are in position of power.
Sanjana, over to you. I can see Adil has his hopes high, but his doubts very much intact about really the need to be realistic where we are today because of the many factors at play.
You know, men can be almost like we've always spoken, right? In on the journey of women getting empowered, men and women both need to come together. Um, my father has always been such an advocate for equality within the home, and then therefore in his world, that has been my standard, and it has been a gold standard, I feel. um and so I expect that of all my colleagues, all my male friends.
Yeah.
And I have to say that over the last few years, their level of awareness, empathy, and active effort has really increased. Um, I am touched by it, um, and it's important. So I don't go around applauding the effort because I feel like it should anyway come naturally. But I'm just so glad that they're onto the path, you know. um while existing in a society that has traditionally been patriarchal, so they do also, I think the first step was them recognizing that there are certain advantages that they naturally have. Once you recognize those advantages is when you can recognize the natural disadvantage for the other gender, whether it's at work, whether it's in family setups. So that recognition I'm grateful for, truly.
So, Dia Mirza, how do you plan to perhaps, maybe I should ask you this about like we all want to raise our sons better to be better citizens, will mean more equal relationships in society. How do you see that changing with new generations? Do you think young women are making the switch, breaking the toxic cycle of inequality and saying, yes, we will lead this shift? And that will really be sort of phenomenal for the next generations to come.
Well, we are, far beyond, far back. We do need to push forward, and the only way we can do it is by raising our children who understand the importance of equality. And it starts at home, Shaili. We've discussed this
Right.
before. I think our children, our boys, are fortunate that they have parents who understand the importance of gender equality and who understand the power of empathy and also understand the power of participation. And I hope that, in the small,
Yeah.
simple choices that we make at home every day, in the way we represent ourselves as parents, in the roles that we play, whether it is sharing chores or sharing responsibilities and doing everything, not as male and female, but as equals. And for a child to be able to perceive and understand that, and of course be raised with the understanding that he comes from a place of privilege, it's his duty to ensure that he recognizes that, and he uses his voice and his understanding and his knowledge to help make the world a more gender equal place.
लूसी, अपनी जर्नी के बारे में हम सबको बताएं और शेयर करें कि किस तरह आपकी सर्कमस्टांसेस बदले, आपकी स्ट्रगल सक्सेसेस में बदली और आगे किस तरह आप ये एफर्ट को बाकी लड़कियों तक पहुंचाने में थ्रू कम्युनिकेशन, थ्रू इंस्पिरेशन एक एफर्ट करेंगी इस चीज़ का।
हाँ, हम सेव द चिल्ड्रन में 5 साल से जुड़े हैं। तो हम पहले बच्चों लोग के लिए काम करते थे, रिक्स को लेकर हम लोग काम करते थे। तो हमने इस तरह काम करते करते जब 2019 आया था, उसमें एक स्ट्रीट चाइल्ड वर्ल्ड कप जो लंदन में था, उसमें मुझे अपॉर्चुनिटी मिला था वहाँ पर खेलने जाने का। तो हम वहाँ पर खेले थे। वहाँ पर एक मीटिंग था जो पार्लियामेंट बोला जाता है, तो वहाँ पे सब बच्चे, सब कंट्री के बच्चे लोग आए थे। वहाँ बोला गया था कि अपने यहाँ के बच्चों के बारे में बताने की क्या प्रॉब्लम होता है, कौन सा प्रॉब्लम को फेस कर रहे हैं बच्चे लोग। तो वहाँ पर मेरा मुद्दा था कि जेंडर को लेकर, क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ पर बहुत सारे बच्चों लोग को लेकर जेंडर को लेकर बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था, लड़का लड़की में भेदभाव करते थे। तो हमारा वहाँ पर ये हुआ। जब हम रिटर्न आए तो हम लोग यहाँ पर ड्रीम एक्सलेटर नाम का एक प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट किए थे जो जेंडर के ऊपर था। हमारा मुद्दा था कि हर घरों में समझाना कि लड़का लड़की इक्वल समान है, दोनों में भेदभाव नहीं करना चाहिए। और शिक्षा क्यों जरूरत है? अगर हम शिक्षित रहेंगे तो हम लोग का जो, अगर पढ़े लिखे रहेंगे तो हम लोग कहीं अगर जाते हैं या कहीं कुछ होता है तो हम वहाँ बता सकते हैं। और हम लोग को, लड़कियां लोग को पढ़ना इम्पोर्टेंट इसलिए है क्योंकि लड़कियां लोग चाहेगी तो अपने, अगर वो पढ़ी लिखेगी तो अपने जनरेशन को अच्छे से पढ़ा लिखकर वो अच्छा उसको मतलब रास्ता सही दिखाएंगे। क्योंकि हम लोग यहाँ पर अगर पढ़े लिखे नहीं रहते तो हम लोग गलत रास्ता चुन लेते हैं, जिसके कारण शिक्षित होना बहुत जरूरत है।
Girls and women are at the receiving end of many big gaps, whether it's hygiene, health, education, access to digital, online learning, whether it's access to schooling, access to just having opportunities. It is high time that deeper conversations on these happen in the very context that any effort that seemed to be progressing on track has been pushed behind several years due to the impact of COVID and the pandemic. We perhaps need to work towards speeding up those initiatives, bringing together a cohort of people from different walks of life that remind us pretty much every single day, through the power of the influence they bring, through the power of social media they have, that we all need to be part of this journey and impact that change and then drive that change. Because without this, whatever effort that's being done on the ground will continue to remain pushed back as we deprioritize this in the light of what has been a pandemic unraveling. So I'm looking forward to all of your support as a part of what we've been talking about here. Not just expect only the panelists to do what they've done and will continue to do so. Each one of us needs to make each one of us count. Thanks so much for joining us.